In the previous lecture, we prepared our SD card, isn't it? In this lecture, let's boot the BeagleBone hardware using the micro SD card interface. These are the steps you have to follow. First of all, make sure that your BeagleBone is not powered up. If you have connected it to the PC, please remove it. And after that, connect the serial debug cable between BeagleBone Black and host. This is actually optional step, but if you have that cable, then it's better to connect that, because by using that we can observe the early boot messages of the kernel. That is, you have to use this cable to establish a serial connection. Just connect this end to BeagleBone serial port pins and this end to your PC. After that, insert the SD card to BeagleBone. And after that, give the power to the board using mini USB cable. Just give the power. And when you give the power, what happens? The board boots by using the images which is there in the eMMC, remember. Let it boot, no problem. That's the default boot. Let it boot. Then what you do is press and hold the boot button, that is S2. After that, press and hold the power button S3 until the blue LED turns off and turns on again. If blue LED doesn't turn on, gently press the power button. That means you are doing a power down of the board by pressing the S3. Then gently press the power button. When you do that, the board powers up again. After around 2 to 5 seconds, you release the S2 button. That's how you change the boot sequence. In this case, the board will boot from the micro SD card. Let's do these steps. First of all, let me open the command prompt, and I have connected my serial debug connection. Just run the command dmessage. Here you see some logs which is related to our USB serial converter. That is the cable what we connected for our serial debug connection. It shows that the converter is detected. In my case, the converter is this one. If you just Google this, so basically it's a USB to TTL converter chipset from Prolific Technology. If you are using some different cable, then the chip may be different. It could be from FTDI or it could be from some other manufacturer. In that case, it would show some other vendor here. That's not an issue. But you should see something like this. The converter is attached to a device file, that is TTY USB 0 or TTY USB 1, something like that. That means we are going to establish the serial debug connection over TTY USB 0. So that means the host is going to communicate with the board over serial communication over this device file, that is TTY USB 0. You should see something similar. And after that, let's use minicom to observe the serial data. For that, just run sudo minicom -s. After that, go to serial port setup here, and here press the key A, and here you can change whether it could be TTY USB 0, USB 1 or 2 or something like that. So in my case it is USB 0. Then type enter to exit from here. Enter. After that, if you want to change the baud rate, that is BPS, you can press the key E, and from here you can select the bits per second, parity and data or something like that. For example, if I want to change the baud rate to 9600, then I would just press the key C. You can see that the baud rate got changed. But we are going to use 115200, that's why I would press the key E. Hit enter to exit this. And after that, make sure that hardware flow control no and software flow control no. If you want to make yes, then you should type that letter. For example, if I want to enable the hardware flow control, then I would press the key F. It becomes yes. But in our case, it should be no. So I would press the key F again to make it no. This should be your setting, and then press enter to exit this menu. After that, go to this option, save setup as default, and press enter. After that, exit. We are in the Minicom. Now Minicom is a serial port application in order to trace the messages which are coming over serial interface. If you want to exit from the Minicom application, it is very simple. You have to press Ctrl A. Just press Ctrl A, and after that X. You can leave the Minicom like this. So I would press no here. If I press yes, what happens? The Minicom terminates. And if you want to again open the Minicom, then either you use sudo minicom -s or just sudo minicom, because you have already saved the setup as default. That's why I just type sudo minicom for the next time. Let's do these steps. Insert the SD card to the BBB and give power to the board using mini USB cable. Let me do that. Let me give power to the board. Now you are seeing some boot messages here. So you may see something like this, or you may not see something like this. It doesn't matter what you see here. Go to the next step. The next step is very important. You have to press and hold the boot button, and then press and hold the power button until the blue LED turns off and turns on again. And once the blue LED turns on again, release the S2 button after 2 to 5 seconds. Let's do that. I am now press and holding the S2 button, and now I am long pressing the S3 button. I am waiting for the power down. You can see that it started booting. Now leave the S2 button. You can see that the board is booting from the SD card. We got the BeagleBone login. The board has successfully booted from the SD card interface, and this is a login name and this is a password. Let's type Debian, and the password is temppwd. We successfully logged in into our BeagleBone Black hardware. Just run uname -r and you should see this number. This is from the pre-built image of what we have used, 4.4.62. So you also should see the same number because you also booted from the pre-built images which I have given to you, right? We have to do one important step. Here, to boot from the SD card, we played with the buttons like S2 and S3, but that's a tedious process. Let's skip doing that. But still, our board should boot from the SD card. For that, let's do one small hack. What we can do is let the board use this default boot sequence, no problem. First, it checks MMC1 and then it goes to the MMC0. Here, what we can do is in the eMMC, let's do some changes to the boot images. Let's invalidate the boot images. If you do that, the board first checks for the eMMC and it fails because we have invalidated the boot images. That's why the next source in the boot order is SD card. That's why the board will boot from the SD card. That means we have to do some changes to the eMMC memory. If you do this, then we need not to play with S2 and S3 button. So you just give power to the board, it boots from the SD card. Let's do that. Just follow what I do now. Go to the command prompt and make sure that you logged in into the BeagleBone. Create one mount point because we have to mount the eMMC partition now. Just first type the command sudo -s, enter the password temp pwd, and create one folder in media folder. Let me call it as temp1. This is the mount point. Now to mount the partition, you have to use the command mount. Mount, the partition is dev mmc block 1, mmc block 1 p1. Why? Because as I explained before, mmc1 interface is for eMMC and mmc0 interface is for micro SD card. That's why you have to use mmc block 1 p1, partition 1. This is mmc block 1 partition 2. This is a boot partition of the eMMC, and the mount point is what we created, media temp1. It throws some error or some warning, that's okay. Let's get into the mount point, media temp1. These are the boot images of eMMC, remember that. Here, just change the name of this MLO. Use the move command, change MLO to MLO.backup, something like that. We just alter this name. You can always go back and you can fix this to MLO later. Now what happens? When you do a default boot, the board first checks for the eMMC. It first checks for the file called MLO. Since MLO is not present here, it goes to the next boot source in the boot order, and the next one is SD card. We just changed this name, that's it. And after that, you have to execute the command sync. After that, you have to shut down -h now. The board will be powered down. So you can see that your board went to power down mode. Just press the power button, that's it. Or you can remove the cable from the PC and connect it back. So I would do that. I would just remove the USB cable from the PC and I connect it back. Now you can see that you need not to press any S2 or S3, it boots from the SD card. That's great. And in the next lecture, I will cover Linux kernel image update. I will see you in the next lecture.